My brother kicked me out over dinner, and my parents said nothing. You've got 1 week to move out. That's what my brother said, smirking at me from across the dinner table like it was no big deal. Linda and Tom didn't say a word, just sat there watching, silent. I reached into my folder and laid the property records down on the table. Actually, I told them, you've got 24 hours. Their forks clattered to their plates the second they read the paperwork. But before I dive into all that, let me say this. I've noticed the channel's been slowing down a bit lately. If you're here and you like these stories, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to show support. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps keep this community growing strong. All right, back to the story. I never imagined roast chicken and mashed potatoes would be the backdrop for betrayal, but life has a funny way of serving up its worst moments when everything seems normal. It was a cold Sunday evening, the kind where the wind shakes the windows, and the whole house smells like rosemary and butter. I had just finished setting the table for dinner. Linda was lounging near the fireplace, half distracted by some worn-out celebrity gossip magazine. Tom had the evening news on low volume, and we were all waiting on my older brother, Jason. As usual, he was late, even though dinner was supposed to start at 6. He finally strolled in around 6:30, wearing a smug grin, flashing a flashy watch, and carrying a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine no one had asked him to bring. That house, our family home, had been through the ringer more than once. We nearly lost it during the 2008 financial crash, and then again when the medical bills piled up after Tom's surgery. Jason hadn't been there for either of those times. He was off living in Chicago, chasing some high-flying corporate life. He only called when it was convenient for him, and never once showed up when things got rough. I was the one who stuck around. I was the one juggling 2 jobs, crashing in the tiny guest room, pouring every paycheck into patching up the roof, fixing busted plumbing, and making sure we didn't lose the house. I didn't do it for a pat on the back. I did it because someone had to step up. Because I couldn't just sit by and watch the home we grew up in fall apart. Because I believed, maybe foolishly, that family looks out for each other, even when it's not easy. So when Jason sat down that night, barely looked me in the eye, and casually said, mid-bite, no less, that I had a week to move out, I honestly thought he was joking. You've got a week to clear your stuff, he said, sipping his wine like he was reading off a grocery list. Linda and Tom are getting older. They need some peace. You working from the living room is stressing everyone out. I just stared at him, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. It didn't even register at first. I turned to Linda and Tom, waiting for them to laugh or tell him to knock it off. But they didn't. Linda kept her eyes on her plate. Tom cleared his throat awkwardly and mumbled something about the house feeling a little crowded lately. And just like that, my stomach dropped. It was like ice settling in my gut. Crowded? I paid off the mortgage last year, I said, my voice louder than I intended. I've been the one handling everything while you were off pretending to be some big-shot executive in another state. Jason just shrugged. You did what any decent son would do, he said. But this isn't about money anymore. It's about what's best for them. Best for them? You haven't even been around, I shot back. You didn't call when Tom was in the hospital. I was the one cooking meals, helping him bathe, fighting with insurance companies when they denied his meds. Now you show up with overpriced wine and suddenly think you're in charge. Jason didn't flinch. He calmly reached into his bag, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table. It's already done, he said. Apparently, he had some lawyer draft up paperwork to transfer the house back into our parents' names. He said they'd be the ones deciding who gets to stay, not me. My hands were shaking when I opened that envelope. The documents were real enough, legally formatted, full of official-looking jargon. But the narrative was twisted. Jason was trying to undo the deed that had been legally signed over to me 2 years earlier, part of a financial restructure I paid for. I let out a bitter laugh. You seriously think this'll hold up in court? The deed is in my name. I refinanced under my own credit. I've been covering taxes, bills, insurance, you name it. This hasn't been their house for years, and it sure as hell isn't yours. That's when Linda finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We just want peace, sweetheart. We're tired of all the tension. Tension? You mean me? I asked, stunned. You mean I'm the problem? I looked around the table, and it hit me all at once. This wasn't some spontaneous decision. This had been in the works for a while. Whispers behind closed doors, quiet phone calls I wasn't a part of. Jason didn't come back to reconnect or help. He came to take something he thought was his. And for reasons I couldn't even begin to understand, my parents had decided to let him. I shoved my chair back and stood up, my pulse thudding in my ears. You want to talk legal? I said. Fine. I've got every receipt, bank statement, and mortgage document you can think of. This place was a disaster, and I rebuilt it piece by piece. You think you can throw me out of the home I paid for? You're in for a hell of a surprise. Jason got to his feet too, trying to pull that old intimidation trick he used to get away with when we were kids. Back then, he was the golden child, the star athlete, the one everyone bragged about. And me? I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the fallback plan. But I wasn't a kid anymore. And this time, I didn't flinch. "You're being emotional," he said, calm and smug like he was talking to a child. "Just leave quietly. Spare them the stress." I locked eyes with him. "No. You all have 24 hours to leave this house, or I'll have you removed myself. I'll call the sheriff if I have to." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda gasped, like I'd said something unthinkable. "You're kicking your parents out?" "I'm reclaiming what's mine," I said, my voice steady even as my heart pounded like a war drum. "I didn't want it to come to this, but you left me no other option." And with that, I turned around and headed for my room, locking the door behind me. I had no clue what the next day would look like, whether they'd pack up quietly or turn this into a legal mess. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I was done playing the selfless son, the one who kept giving until there was nothing left. They treated me like some squatter in the very house I saved from falling apart. They had no idea just how far I was willing to go to protect what I had built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. Because this place, this house, it wasn't just lumber and drywall. It was my line in the sand. And they'd finally crossed it. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The home I'd grown up in had turned into a battleground. And the people I thought would stand with me were the very ones aiming their weapons at my back. The betrayal ran on repeat in my head like a broken record. Jason's smug face, Linda's silence, Tom refusing to meet my eyes. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the old family photos on the wall. There I was at 6 years old, holding Jason's hand at the zoo, beaming. Another photo showed us all around the Christmas tree, arms around each other, smiling like nothing could touch us. Funny how the people in those frames could feel like total strangers now. At first light, I got dressed, grabbed the folder of documents I'd been putting together over the past couple of years, every receipt, every tax return, every record of payment, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Mr. Whitaker was a steady presence, an older guy who'd helped me navigate the legal maze when I took ownership of the house. He was there when my parents were drowning in debt, and I stepped in, refinancing everything in my name to keep the house from being foreclosed on. I signed the contract. I paid off the mortgage. The title was mine. When I told him what happened, he didn't even blink. "Families don't always fall apart because of greed," he said, flipping through the paperwork. "Sometimes it's entitlement that does them in. I'll draw up a cease and desist order right away. In the meantime, you're completely within your rights to ask them to leave." By the time I got back home, it was noon. Jason's car was still in the driveway. Inside, my parents were lounging around like nothing had happened, Linda glued to her soap opera, Tom buried in the paper. I stood in the doorway and said flatly, "You've got 48 hours to pack up and leave. If you're still here after that, I'll get law enforcement involved." And no, I'm not bluffing. Linda looked at me like I just slapped her across the face. "You can't be serious," she said. "You raised me here," I said, "and I saved it. You gave up your right to call this your home the second you signed it over and dumped all the debt on me." Jason stood up again, trying to look tough. "You'd really throw your own parents out?" "I already called a locksmith," I said, calm as ever. "By tonight, the locks will be changed. If you want to avoid that kind of embarrassment, I suggest you start packing." He scoffed, some half laugh, half snort, but something in my voice must have hit a nerve, because he didn't argue. He stormed off upstairs, slamming the door behind him. Tom followed, muttering under his breath. Linda just sat there, shaking her head slowly. "I loved you so much," she whispered. "No," I said. "You loved what I did for you. That's not the same thing." That night, I had the locks changed. I installed a security system and put a camera above the front door. And while I still couldn't sleep, this time it was from sheer exhaustion, not fear. The house, for the first time in years, was finally quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Still, the silence carried weight, a heavy anticipation of what came next. The following morning, they started packing. Watching my parents carry boxes out of the house I had poured my soul into was like living in someone else's life. I didn't lift a finger to help, and they didn't ask me to. Jason was the last one out. He paused in the doorway, taking a long, slow look around, like he was trying to burn every inch of the place into memory. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," I replied. "You ended it the day you tried to take what wasn't yours." He let out a bitter laugh, but he didn't argue. He just walked away. And for the first time in my life, I closed the door behind him. Then I locked it and felt something click shut inside me too. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest I've ever lived through. Word got around fast. Some relatives sided with me. Most didn't. I was labeled cold, heartless, ungrateful. One of my uncles even sent me a long-winded message, telling me that no matter the circumstances, evicting my parents made me a monster. I never replied. What nobody seemed to understand was that none of this was what I wanted. I didn't choose this fight. I didn't want to cut them off or stand alone. I had given everything, my time, my money, my peace of mind, to keep this family standing. I stood between them and collapse, not for power, not for control, but because I believed we were a team. But we weren't. And when people show you they're willing to throw you away the moment you stop being useful, you stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Then, one day, a letter showed up in the mail. It was from my mother. Same soft, looping handwriting she used back when she'd leave notes in my lunchbox in elementary school. I opened it slowly, hoping for something closure, maybe. But it wasn't an apology. Not even close. She wrote that she forgave me for what I'd done, that she hoped one day I'd come to my senses. She said she and my father had moved in with Jason. He had a spare room in his condo downtown. She mentioned things were tight but manageable. And she ended the letter with, "We still love you, even if we don't understand you anymore." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. Because I didn't need forgiveness from people who had never asked for mine. And I didn't need to be understood by people who'd never once tried to understand me. Weeks blurred into months. The silence from my family stretched longer with each passing day. Holidays came and went. No cards, no calls, no invitations. I spent Christmas alone in the house I saved. Still put up the lights. Cooked myself a proper dinner. Sat by the fireplace with a book. And you know what? It was peaceful. Eventually, I turned the guest room into a home office. Converted the attic into a studio space. Started running my business full-time from home. And every nail I hammered, every coat of paint I rolled on, every creak I repaired, I did it for me. Not for their approval. Not to earn my place. But because for the first time, this house truly felt like mine. It finally felt like home. I still think about them sometimes. I wonder if they miss me. If they ever realized what they threw away. But I don't reach out. I don't stalk their social media. And when Jason's number lights up my phone every few months, I let it ring. Because I've learned something the hard way. Love without respect is just manipulation dressed up to look like affection. And sometimes, choosing peace means walking alone. This house wasn't just built on concrete and timber. It was built on loyalty, on sacrifice, on grit. And no matter what anyone says, that can never be taken from me.